All right, on the agenda for today, we're going to go ahead and continue the notes on midpoint and midpoint formula. There's some practice problems here in the PowerPoint, and then you guys have a Google form at the end. By the end of class today, you should be able to calculate the midpoint and use midpoint to solve for the missing links. So we're going to go ahead and look at the midpoint formula. So in the part one, we just looked at when we were given a line segment with the equations, but it is possible that we're just going to be given coordinates on a coordinate plane, and based off the coordinates, we need to solve for the midpoint. So in order to do this, we use something called the midpoint formula. And for the midpoint formula, what you're doing is you're finding basically the average of your x values and of your y values. So we're going to take our 2 points and we're going to label that first point x1, y1, and the second point x2, y sub 2. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to use this formula to calculate the midpoint, which is our x values added together divided by 2, and then our y values added together divided by 2 to get our coordinates of the midpoint. So we're given the endpoints of RS. R is at 1, -3, and S is at 4, -2. Always what I like to do first is I like to take my points and label them. So 1, -3, that's going to be my x sub 1, y sub 1. 4, 2 is going to be my x sub 2, y sub 2. And then I'm going to go ahead, after labeling them, I'm going to plug in or substitute back in my x values to my equation. So I have the equation x sub 1 plus x sub 2. So 1 plus 4 divided by 2. 1 plus 4 is 5 divided by 2. So I have 5 over 2, or 5 halves. And I'm going to go and take my y values. My y sub 1 is -3. I'm going to add it with my y sub 2 value, which is 2, and that's going to give me -1 divided by 2, which is -1/2. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to take these coordinates and I'm going to write them also as decimals. So 5 over 2 is going to give me 2.5, and then -1 over 2 is -0.5. Either way, you guys can write them out as fractions or as decimals. It's fine. Go ahead and try this problem here. You're given the endpoints of k and j, and you want to solve for the midpoint m. So again, what you should have gotten after labeling your points, x sub 1, y sub 1 is my -3, 7. -2, 5 is x sub 2, y sub 2. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and first plugging in my x values. I'm going to get -3 plus -2, and that sum is divided by 2, which is -5 over 2. And then do the same thing with my y values. 7 plus 5 divided by 2. The sum of 7 and 5 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So showing it again as first fractions, -5 over 2, 6, but then also showing it as a decimal, -2.5, 6. Now we have a different example. Here we are given the midpoint of the line segment JK, and we are given one of the endpoints, and our goal is to find the other endpoint K. So in this case, we're still going to go ahead and I'm going to label what I know for sure. I know my x sub 1, y sub 1 is 1, 4 because I was given that endpoint. To start off with, though, now we don't know my other endpoint, x sub 2, y sub 2, but I do know the midpoint. And thinking about our formula, I'm going to go ahead and again, solving for my x value first. I know my x sub 1 is 1. I don't know my x sub 2, but I know that when I take that sum and divide it by 2, I should be getting 2 because 2 is my x value for my midpoint. So if I want to isolate x sub 2, I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. The 2's cancel out. I'm left with 1 plus x sub 2 is equal to 2 times 2 is 4. Subtracting 1 from both sides, I get 3. So now I've solved for my x sub 2. I'm going to do the same process for my y sub 2. And again, I want to isolate my y sub 2. So if I want to isolate the y sub 2, I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. The 2's cancel out. I'm left with 4 plus y sub 2 is equal to 1 times 2 is 2. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 4 from both sides to isolate my y sub 2, and I'm going to get -2. So then that means that my other endpoint should be 3, -2. Go ahead and try solving for my other endpoint of k. So again, I know my x sub 1, y sub 1. I'm going to go and substitute what I know back into my equation. I'm trying to solve for x sub 2. I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. The 2's cancel out on this side of my equation, on the left-hand side. I'm left with -1 plus x sub 2 is equal to 8. Add 1 to both sides, I get 9. Same thing for my y's.